When presenting units on the civil rights movement, teachers often focus solely on Martin Luther King Jr. While I agree that it is important to highlight his accomplishments, I think that it is equally important that students understand that his perspective was not the only one. So in addition to lessons focusing on King, I also chose to have students look at Malcolm X and his philosophy on desegregation. I would first have students explore the lives of the two men through the picture book Malcolm's Big Words, The Life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and A Graphic Biography, Malcolm X. After reading both, I will have students look at both the similarities and differences between the two men. Both noticed and questioned racism when they were young, and both lost their fathers to violence as children. So I want students to explore how each man chose to take a different path and how that affected their approach to civil rights down the road. As a disclaimer, while I think that the graphic biography of Malcolm X is fascinating and would appeal to a lot of students, I would not read it in its entirety unless it was with high school students, as some of the criminal activities and sexual exploits of his youth are described and illustrated in graphic detail. In order to explore both men's philosophies on how African Americans should work to achieve equal rights, I would have students look at Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail and listen to Malcolm X's speech, By Any Means Necessary. In his letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King responds to criticism from white clergy that social injustice should be fought only in the courts. He explains his nonviolent approach as a way of forcing the community to address injustice. His philosophy is reflected in the protests of the movement, such as sit-ins and marches. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Malcolm X argues that African Americans should fight for their rights by any means necessary. His speech explains how he came to this conclusion by traveling through Africa and seeing how their methods have brought them independence much quicker than the efforts of blacks in America. Malcolm X also had a profound influence on the fight for civil rights, which is shown by the efforts of radical groups such as the Black Panthers. I think that it is important for students to understand that while Martin Luther King's ideas were very effective, he was not the only leader of the civil rights movement. I would ask students to create Venn diagrams comparing both the lives of the two men as well as their philosophies. I would then have them complete a writing assignment in which they discuss why they think the two men developed such different ideas on how to approach civil rights. I will now explain some of the assignments that I will use to assess student learning throughout my unit. I will regularly ask students to write reflections and responses to the day's lesson. Rather than use the traditional static format of writing them down in a journal, however, I will ask students to record their ideas in a classroom wiki. I chose to use this because I think that it benefits students to share their ideas and questions with their peers in a format where they can respond to each other. The civil rights movement can be a sensitive subject because it forces students to consider issues of race and injustice, many of which they may still see today. I think that it is important for students to have a forum where they can work together to process the information that they have learned. I will grade students based only on participation. If they are posting and responding to others, they will receive full credit. However, I will also be checking the forum daily to ensure that students' posts are appropriate, as well as to respond to any questions that students may have. I will also require students to complete classwork and homework throughout the unit. This will often take the form of writing assignments or graphic organizers. For example, creating a comic book strip portraying one of the personal narratives on the Jim Crow website, or completing Venn diagrams comparing Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. These assignments will provide me with regular feedback about how students' understanding is progressing. They will also be useful as references for the students when they begin to think about their larger projects. As I explored different resources that I might use when designing my unit, I noticed that there are some very powerful images of the people and events involved in the civil rights movement. Another assignment that I will ask the students to work on throughout the unit is building a classroom collage of these images. Students will be responsible for finding at least 3 pictures to add to the image wall throughout the course of the unit. They will be required to present each image to the class and lead a discussion on what makes the image powerful and how it affects their understanding of the civil rights movement. I think that the collage will be an excellent jumping-off point for students as they work on their other projects, as well as giving them ideas to write about on the wiki in their daily reflections. One of the larger projects I will ask my students to complete is a civil rights encyclopedia. They will create encyclopedia pages on important people, places, or events that they learn about through the course of the unit. They will create 5 pages based on lesson topics, and then create 3 more pages based on their own research. Each page will include background or history on the topic, including how it fit into the civil rights movement and its significance to the cause at large. Each page must also include 1 image, which is a time when the image wall will come in handy. Rather than asking students to submit all their pages at the end of the unit, I will require them to submit at least 1 per week so that I can assess their ongoing understanding of the topics. I will use this assessment to see how students are making connections between events and people and if they understand the big picture. At the end of the unit, I will have students create a cover for their encyclopedia and will have each one bound so that students have a professional-looking final project that they can be proud of. As the culminating project for my unit, I will ask students to look at Martin Luther King's ideas on nonviolent protest and examples of these ideas in action, such as sit-ins, the Montgomery bus boycott, and the Children's March. We will then work together as a class to identify an issue or cause that affects the community and/or school that students would like to raise awareness of. Based on the events we have studied, the class will then organize and carry out our own event and attempt to create change. Students will work in committees responsible for different aspects of the event. For example, one committee might create posters to be displayed around the school and town. Another might create a commercial to be aired on the school's television station. Another committee might be responsible for finding sponsors to finance the event. I think that this event will help students move from a theoretical understanding of how groups of people can enact large-scale change to a real-world application. I think that this project will be empowering for students as they use the people and events that they have learned about in the unit as a template for creating their own movement. Thank you for giving me the opportunity throughout this course to share my ideas as well as sharing yours with me. In addition to the civil rights resources mentioned here, I have an extensive list that you can find on the wiki. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me through email at elb4@geneseo.edu. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and I look forward to hopefully getting to know some of you in the fall.